Introduction. I'm Bill Cridlin. I'm the General Manager of Community Services, and as with the Community Services Division, Friday the 13th falls under our portfolio. So I want to welcome you here tonight. The purpose of tonight is to hear your thoughts, comments, suggestions, be it good or bad, on Friday the 13th events in Port Over. As you know, the event has undergone many changes over the years, and the changes continued even with the event this summer. There were a lot of changes with the main street, where we put vendors, how we blocked it off, such as that. So we're here to hear anything you have to say about that. We have also dealt with the three main stakeholders, and when I say that, that's the Port Over Board of Trade, Port Over Kinsmen, and the Port Over Lions. And I say they're our main stakeholders because they actually have some skin in the game. They put some money out to make money, that sort of thing. We have also talked with the OPP, my staff, which includes fire, paramedics, and operational staff and roads who do the closures and things like that. And I can tell you from those meetings that we have come up with some suggestions how to tweak the event further. And what we're here tonight is obviously to hear from your thoughts. And the plan going forward will be after tonight, we get your thoughts. We already have staff's thoughts and the stakeholders. There also is an online question survey out there. I don't see anybody from clerks here, but we'll get clarification on when that's going to close. And staff hope to gather information from all the groups, all the talks, and we'll put that together for a report for council this summer on how we will carry on with Friday the 13th events from now and in the future. So that's the purpose here tonight. I'm hoping we don't plan to get into really heavy debate, because obviously I don't have experts here in certain things like roadblocks and reasons things were put up, but I will do my best to answer what questions I can, but we will take notes, and we're going to ask you to speak, I believe, at the podium. We'd like to, I believe, have your name and address. We have our contact information anyways. We have a number of folks here taking minutes, so what you say will be recorded. And my thoughts were, if we had a bigger crowd, we would probably put a time limit on your speech, but I'll leave that up to Mayor Chop. We definitely want you to get your complete stories and everything you've came here to tell us and your thoughts out tonight. So perhaps with that, I'll turn it over to Mayor Chop and we'll get the meeting started. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Bill. Well, thanks everybody for joining us this evening. And I guess I think Bill's laid it out perfectly. So whoever wants to come forward first, if you could please state your name and an address for the record, or I believe there's a contact sheet that's been provided. If you could fill that out is fine as well.
My name is Alexander David Bodner. I live at 143 Washington Street, Waterford, Ontario. And I want to know why we need such big police coverage there. Like renting a helicopter with that motor for an hour is well over $1,000 an hour. Isn't that right, Mrs. Chop? Miss Chop?
I'm sure.
You know what a Westinghouse motor takes to run an hour. Okay, why do we need it? The guys take care of the problems themselves. I've seen many little skirmishes, but the other guys grab hold of it, they stop it before it starts. We don't need 2,000 cops there. You go to Sturgis, South Dakota. They have over 500,000 people a year come to that little town, and it's the same size as Waterford. And they don't have no big skirmishes like here. Ooh, the Hells Angels are going to get me, or the Outlaws are going to have a big duel between them. Ooh, that's terrible. You know, I'd like to know why we have to have such a big police presence, and I'd like to meet the genius who thought, hey, let's put a roadblock up in the middle of town. That's a good thing. And when it had to go down, they wouldn't go down. They were faulty. They didn't even work. I was standing right there when they hit the buttons and, oh, we can't get through. You know. Now, what good was that? But we got to have the roadblocks because it's evil. And all these evil bikers that go there, gosh, they're evil people. There was a fellow from town here. Did you ever hear of a guy by the name of Jack Aid? He was a jeweler downtown. And he used to ride a bike. And he'd go to Friday the 13th. A fellow I know from Oakland, Ontario, Joe Yerrick. He was an evil man too. He hired, 6, 7 people working at his motorcycle shop. And he used to go to Friday the 13th. And I know other people who like going there just to look at the motorcycles. It's not an evil thing like people seem to think it is, but it's just, ooh, look at the big bad bikers. You know, it's like when you go there, it's like you're standing in, like I'm the girl in the cage going tee hee hee, and everybody's looking. You know, now I don't understand. What's the big deal? Can anybody explain to me why you got to run a helicopter up there for $1,000 an hour?
Did you want to touch base on the?
Through Mayor Chap, I'm making notes here, and again, that's probably something that's better answered by the police, so I'm not slushing it off, but I mean, they play a part in this, and it's
Yeah,
definitely
they
a
play a
question.
big part of brain dead. I mean, I'd like to meet the genius who thinks they need all that.
Okay, I'm taking notes, and we'll get to the OPP on those.
I mean, there's no need to run a helicopter up there in circles for $1,000 an hour or more. There's no need for it. I've been going there since the first inception of it. I was at the very second one. The first one, just the guys who started were there. I was and Chris and the guys, they said, come on out next Friday the 13th. Fine, so I did. And there was about 20, 30 people there. You know, that was cool. And then it got bigger, bigger, bigger. And now everybody comes because it's people from Michigan, people from Indiana, Ohio. They all come there to join it. And they all love it. Like we've had big dignitaries like, what's her name? Jean Davison from the Harley Davidson family. She was there. What do you call it? The other Davison fellow there, he owns Harley Davidson now. He was there, and they were evil people. I mean, multi-million-dollar people, and they're there. Wow, they're going to get killed.
So just so we're clear, I think that council has demonstrated their support for Friday the 13th. Well, the one option was that was presented to us was to move it to private property, was to cancel the event entirely. So some of the changes have originated because we have our fire, OPP, and EMS all telling us that on a summer event that we need to make some changes to ensure public safety.
Well, for public safety, very simple. Let the guys police themselves, and it will never happen. Nothing will, like over there in Daytona, Sturgis, Laconia, California, or not California, but they don't have a problem. They don't have, they got the National Guard sitting outside town for a couple miles. But
okay, I'm going to quite go off. I saw Councilor Martin want to maybe speak up there for a second.
Who?
Amy.
Hello, sir. Thanks for coming. You can take a seat if you'd like, but I guess this is probably a perfect opportunity to say that because we're hosting this and because staff are here taking notes, I would like that to be a very bold statement to everyone who is upset with the arrangement that previously occurred, that we are open to suggestion and we're here to listen to you. That being said, I love Friday the 13th. This is my community. I will support this event as long as I possibly can, but we are here looking for suggestions. So as far as comments regarding helicopters and circulation and duration of time, great feedback, but something that we can't provide an answer to you about tonight because that is operational from a police perspective and not something that we have any control in. So again, I would really welcome some suggestions that you'd like for us to take and move forward with implementation.
My name is Craig Saunders. I'm 636 St. Andrew Street, Port Dover, Ontario. My thing is this last Friday the 13th, when it came down to the food vendors and stuff like that, I found that it was more of an inconvenience that it was on the main street because of the clutter, the motorcycles and people walking up, where when they were on the side streets, people were more apt to be more relaxed and they could stroll down there and grab their food and sit at a picnic table or do something. I found there was less chaos that way. I found it very inconvenient where it was because people were piling up down the main street and people are trying to grab food and they can't because it's so tight in there. You know what I'm saying? And the barriers themselves were I think were really resistant to the fact of people be able to access and walk through, where if they would have just put the regular barriers up, people would be able to waddle through. And I know the safety factor, that there was consideration that somebody could run down the street, and hits people and stuff. But I mean, all the Friday 13th I've experienced all my life, I've never heard of a problem really per se, and police presence pretty well covers that, you know, helping out and stuff like the EMS or firefighters or stuff. But the thing is what we had it before. Like, you know, the food vendors where they were, the kinsmen where, like, I volunteer a lot down there and I help out, you know, cleaning up or doing stuff. And I found where they are is a perfect place. So I just don't understand why council decided all of a sudden to change the format and the game plan from vendors being where they are, you know, the parkette or down by the church, you know, or, you know, down the street by the theater, you know, where people were actually more relaxed, you know. And I find that if you put it back where it belongs, you might have something a lot better.
So we have had meetings with our community groups to better understand sort of their views, and they've articulated some challenges and stuff that they you know, encountered with that setup, and those are all being taken into consideration moving forward. The one thing is, though, when we did make those changes in terms of the setup of the vendors, we did have the endorsement of the Board of Trade and of the Kinsmen. So they have been organizing that component for years, and they supported those changes, but they too, at the same time, recognized that some things didn't work with that setup. So we've had meetings with them since, and we're going to...
I just don't understand why, you know, something that's not broken, you try to fix, you know, where something wasn't really need to be fixed. It was perfect the way it was. I mean, Powell Park, there was hardly anything in it. They could have used some of that even.
Well, again, you know what, I'm just going to say this. So, and sometimes when you have your fire, your EMS, and your police all coming forward and saying, you know what, they see some challenges that need to be addressed. Only Councillor Martin and myself actually live in Port Dover. So to say that all these council members around the table are going to go against the advice of their fire department, of their EMS, of their police department, when there's liability issues that are attached to it.
Right.
You know, so it ends up becoming a negotiation with them. And we did trade off a lot of things. And maybe we need to go back to the drawing board and fix some of it. But to just say flat out to your fire and your EMS and your police, we're not listening to you and we're not listening to your advice, I mean,
But
clearly that can't happen.
I know, and I really understand the fact of the EMS and the firefight, but also at the same factors, those barriers that were up there, if you really look at it with the amount of crowds that were inside of that area and the EMS or the fire department or anybody else trying to get through there with those barriers the way they were, I looked at it as being an impossibility, because if you watch the people walking around those barriers or trying to get through all the time, they were tripping over each other. You know, somebody could have got hurt just by doing that. It's effectively enough because where you're walking around it, there was a jam up in both sides of them. And I've seen people colliding with each other, and, you know, it could spark something or cause a severe problem, you know, somewhere along the line. So, you know, there's got to be a simpler solution to that problem where they could figure out how to plan that better, and also plan the fact of, you know, making sure that people are not being stepped on while trying to get a hot dog or things like that. You know, I've seen it over the years where people are just, you know.
Hey, I was sitting at 211 Main and I saw a car come up through the crowds despite all of the, two cars actually, despite all of the barriers that we had that were driving up the road and were stuck at the end. So
I mean, that's where the police should be coming into the factor again, where they should be more observant or being on a factor of attention for details for that factor, because we have enough police officers that are being attentive to the fact of the crowds. So there shouldn't be a problem where they can come into play and working with that actually itself. I don't think that putting the barriers that short distance apart was an actual thing either. That if you were going to do it, you should have put it down at Clinton Avenue or Clinton Street and started from there right up to where the lights were then. Then you would have had a better, wider area, because as you notice, at Clinton Street, there's not much after Clinton Street going down towards the beach unless it's a summertime kind of deal. And then you got the top part, which is much more busy because a lot of the bikes park there and then they walk down into it. So
see, these are the suggestions we're after hearing.
That's just suggestions.
Okay, Councillor Van Passen, I see you wanted to say something.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I just want to make you feel like
so
you weren't
much.
totally alone, that you and the Deputy Mayor are the only ones. I was actually at the very first Friday the 13th, even though I didn't know it that year until a couple of years later. And I was on City of Nanticoke Council when it got big enough that the municipality had to step in, and we created the PD13 committee and got sort of a collective actions, and I've watched it grow ever since. So I do have a bit of history and
I
understanding
didn't mean in
it,
terms
so,
of the history of the event. You all have more history with the event than I do. I just meant more in terms of we're not going to sit around and go
Yeah.
against all of our own staff.
And-
We have to,
And I appreciate our last deputation. He's not just here saying, I don't like it. He's got solutions to make
Some
it better.
solutions.
And that's what we're here to listen for.
perfect. If you guys could also please sign in, there's a sheet just along the back there. If you could sign your name after you're done speaking, that's fine. So the next person, if you want to come forward.
Hi, I'm Jane Laidlaw, and I'm 235 Main Street, Port Dover. I own a business in town that is primarily for motorcycle enthusiasts, and I have a busy working band, and we play at many of the Friday the 13th events. And I feel as though I have a pretty good holistic view about what was happening at the last one. The biggest feeling I had in the beginning of the day was feelings of people coming into my store, which incidentally was right beside the big concrete barrier we're talking about. So I heard an awful lot of reaction at that particular place. Not positive. I had some very upset customers. I had some very confused customers. It was distressing for me to look outside and see an empty road at 10:30 in the morning when typically it's very, very busy. People are still trying to figure out where to park and where to go. It was distressing. There was lots of other business owners that sort of congregated in front of my shop, and we were talking about what was happening. And they had vendors set up directly in front of their own businesses, which was a big problem because, as we know, Port Dover is really difficult to get through in the wintertime as a business. And we rely heavily on this event. Many of us do to get through the year. It's a very big financial output initially to be able to facilitate the customers that are coming in. And on a personal level, I will say I took a huge financial hit this time around, and I think there must be some correlation between that and the amount of traffic that was actually able to go by the shop. The park was empty. There were no vendors in the park whatsoever, which seemed to me to be a huge waste. I'm wondering if it's possible that we could have a designated lane on the road at maybe not in the middle, but at the side, so you can still have 2 rows of motorcycles, which is what the people come. They want to look at them. They want to talk to the owners. They want to, pop in and out of the shops. They come and get their T-shirts. I really hope that we can reconsider this and find a way that is better for the people that come to our town and spend their money. And I want them to be happy when they arrive. And it felt to me as though they were coming into, one of them described it as a war zone. They were seeing weapons outside. They were seeing concrete barriers. They were seeing all of these things. And it's also my understanding that there was an incident and an ambulance couldn't get through because of the barrier. So to me, that was a detriment. Anyway, but I think that's all I have to say. I'm sure I'll think of things after, but thank you very much.
So Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Thank you for coming forward and sharing your perspective and for the suggestions. And I'm very sorry to hear about any financial hardships due to the changes or lack of traffic. So that's not ever what we want to hear, nor did we anticipate. One thing I wanted to mention, was about the vendors in front of other businesses. That was something the county was very careful about, and it may have been lost in translation or maybe just wasn't communicated properly, but through our partnership with the Board of Trade, Jan volunteered, volunteered, she's working, but she took that initiative on herself to help represent the county and go door to door to businesses to ask if they would be open and if they would object to having a vendor in front of their business. And that did ebb and flow when people changed their mind, when they checked the weather and so on. But every single business owner, we were told, was contacted with regards to having a vendor in front, and then the Kinsman and the Board of Trade then booked their spaces and allocations accordingly. But any business owner who did not want to have a vendor in front of them because they wished to be open, we wanted it, and as did the Board of Trade and Kinsman, wanted them to be able to retain that space in front of their business. So that was something that we were very cautious of.
Right. And it is my understanding that there's a lot of businesses there that don't necessarily benefit from Friday the 13th, hairdressers, etc. So I could see that there may be some. I certainly wasn't approached about it myself. And the other business owners that came to speak to me that day were also not approached about it. So perhaps they just were closed that day, I'm not sure. But they're definitely, and I don't know if it was a by vote, I'm not sure about that either. But it was absolutely, we couldn't get our head around the fact why our community would allow other people to come from other communities and sell the same merchandise that we're trying to sell right in front of our shops. We understand that, you know, people will come into town, and we want that, but there's a whole park area, there's lots of other areas to do that, and Main Street has always been a place where people, like I said, walk up and down, and they want to visit with each other and see each other. And my observation, and again, it's just an observation, was that the part of the Main Street that was delegated for these vendors was very quiet, as was most of the rest of the Main Street. And that typically is a very, very busy area. So I think that's all I have to say. Okay, thank you.
Who's next?
My name's Sandy Smith. I live at 26 Moore Street in Port Dover. The only thing I've got to say is the question I ask is, why do people come to Friday the 13th? They come to see the motorcycles. So my suggestion is the motorcycles should be front and center and build all the other stuff around it. And that's... Thanks.
Is it okay if I just hand out a piece of paper, just has some pictures? You don't have to. Hello, everyone. Thank you for holding this meeting. My name is Brooke Martin. I'm here representing Cleaning Up Norfolk. We wanted to make suggestions on how the events like Friday the 13th could have less negative impact on our environment. I think everyone is aware of the plastic waste crisis that we're currently faced with. Every minute, the equivalent of a garbage truck of plastic is dumped into our ocean, so I think that we all need to do our part to reduce our dependency on single-use plastic. So I'm just going to quickly cover 3 issues with events like this and potential solutions. The first intervention I'll speak to is also the easiest solution, which is cigarette butt litter. There was a lot of cigarette butts on the ground following the event, especially in the band area. Cigarette butts are plastic and do not biodegrade, and they're the most littered item in the world, and the filter collects toxins and carcinogens. These butts inevitably make their way into our water when they're littered, ingested by wildlife, mistaking it for food. A recent study examined fish out of the Great Lakes, and every fish examined had a piece of microfiber or microplastics in its system. We then consume the fish, and then we are therefore consuming the toxins that are released into the fish through the plastic they eat. So solutions for this are having more bins for collecting cigarette butts. Some I think should be permanent, but I think there should be an increase of them for events like this that are taken down afterwards. Clean Up Norfolk also has acquired pocket ashtrays, which are small reusable pouches, and I have a picture there that you can store butts, and you can actually put lit cigarette butts in them, and they'll extinguish them, and they can be stored until they can be properly disposed. We thought that maybe these ashtrays could be sold at the alcohol token table to be used in the beer tent. Clean Up Norfolk is selling them to raise money for permanent bottle refill stations throughout Norfolk, and Port Dover is currently the priority because of Friday the 13th and other events like that, and its proximity to Lake Erie. If anyone is interested in buying them, they are for sale at Sloss and Molasses. The next issue is plastic water bottles. They are a very large single-use plastic, and they're a large contributor to the current crisis. Plastic in the water bottles have been linked to reproductive issues as well as breast and prostate cancer. Even if the plastic, bisphenol A, BPA free, still they usually have another bisphenol that has the same harmful effects. Tap water in Norfolk is safe to drink, so we don't think that we should be relying on plastic water bottles for public events. We think that people should be encouraged to bring their own reusable water bottles from home. We think council should look at funding permanent water refill stations in areas that are heavily frequented by the public. And the City of Toronto has also modeled a good example, and they have an H2O to go water trailer, which they use for public events, that has drinking water taps as well as cups and water bowls for pets to use. And events can request the use of them from May to September, so that might be something to look into as well. And then lastly is the excessive garbage. Events like Friday the 13th see a lot of single-use plastic, takeout containers and cutlery, as well as a lot of biodegradable items thrown in the garbage. So a solution to this is allowing people in beer tents and things like that to have beer in cans possibly, rather than pouring them into single-use cups. And then also there's been an increase in other municipalities where they've had volunteer-run waste stations that collect waste from patrons and then they properly sort it between recycling, compost, and trash. And then actually a lot of these have now expanded to offering reusable plastic plates, cups, and utensils, which are washed at the waste stations and then redistributed back to vendors to reduce their single-use plastic. There is, of course, more of an upfront cost with this, but it could eventually be save money in the future in terms of garbage removal costs. We think Port Dover's proximity to Lake Erie makes the need for these changes more important. Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming. Appreciate it. Yes, Councilor Columbus.
You mentioned, perhaps I missed it. Are you part of an organization? I heard you say we.
Cleaning Up Norfolk. I'm a volunteer with them, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
You have to go to the museum in Port Dover
Yes,
to see their
yes.
giant sturgeon.
Yes, which models very well the single-use plastic crisis, yes. Yeah.
Thanks for the suggestions.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Who's next?
My name's Cam Lockerbie. I live at 3 Colville Court in Port Ryerson. I've been coming to Port Dover Friday the 13th events since 1989. Not all of them, but just wanted to share one thing, that the first time I've lived all over Canada, and the first time out west that I had anybody who ever found out that I had contact with Port Dover, they mentioned that photo in the cover of the Toronto Sun, where it was the helicopter that was down somewhere over the Bowlby crossing there, and they were looking back, and they took the photo, and it was all those bikes, and it was record set 250,000, whatever it was. It's obviously a huge, and I don't know what the number figures, but what is it, $150, $175 a person on average when they come down here, when you factor in the gas and the food and the beer and all the incidentals, right? So it's obviously a huge, we get that. What I just wanted to make a comment on was, and it's a shame that somebody from the Public Service Committee isn't here to address this. Do we really need an event in our community that needs policemen with machine guns walking up and down the street? Do we live in a country that we need to have an armed presence who's got mass killing machines to keep us in our line? Is the fact that I ride a Harley Davidson sufficient reason for somebody who's in a position to exterminate me in a heartbeat just because I ride a motorcycle? Okay. It's always been, and something I just wanted to bring up. I didn't know this forum was here, and I just wanted to address publicly. was disquieting that I'm sitting there on the steps, and for the record, I've worked in Jane's store that barrier. I know that there was a presentation by the Public Services Committee, and I know that there was a vote and discussion, and obviously that was voted in there. But if that was an attempt to maximize public safety, and I'm certain if it came out of, there's no doubt that it was, I think if we took a data-based look at that, how much was public safety increased? I don't think it was. I don't think the fact that had there been, as somebody mentioned here, I heard some guy running through the street and killing 50 people. I heard that here tonight. If there was a guy running through the street killing 50 people, wouldn't it be cool if the response vehicles could have gone down the main street? Which they were not able to do at that time. So I understand that I've never been, anybody has never given me an adequate reason why that barrier was there. Okay. Again, we want to keep a safe community. Nobody doesn't want that. Going forward, I would just say that when you're in your in-camera meetings and you're discussing with the Police Services Board, what was that point? How did that actually address public safety? Because I don't think you can get, I don't see how it does. That's my question. My feedback is that perhaps, again, I heard the thing about a lane, but I'm absolutely certain that, let's just say that in front of the Norfolk there happened to be an accident where EMS was required. And EMS was positioned down, I don't know, by the baseball diamond. I'm just throwing numbers out here. If they had to respond and they got their sirens blaring, in a thing like that, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where an ambulance is coming at you with intent. One doesn't stand there and dawdle. One grabs one's kids and ducks, right? So I'm not entirely sure that the way that the security was handled was such that it was managing a large outdoor event. Maybe I'm wrong because I'm not in the business of managing large outdoor events. Okay, I admit that there might be a huge blind spot there, and okay, but as a citizen who's just been watching this, it didn't seem as though there was an element of, let's try an anti-catalyst. It felt like there was an anti-catalyst to this event, that this event was trying to be dissolved, as it were, because, well, not everybody who comes to these things are angels by any chance. Bad word. Are what one would call and then it becomes, all of a sudden, I can't say this without categorization. Maybe there's an element of people don't like people who don't ride motorcycles, and maybe there's an element of, it really felt that way at the last Friday the 13th, that there was an us against them element in all the things that I noticed that wasn't there in any of the other 13ths I've been to. Any of the other 13ths I've been to was clearly people who like to party, who are what might be deemed on the margins. It's an opportunity for them to go do their thing. and they go do their thing and they spend their money and they have it, and okay. And I understand that keeping that safe incurs an expense. Obviously, it does. Anytime you have that many people in a place, you do. But just to finish, I understand the need to maintain safety there. I would just say, take a look at it and say, is that the best way that we could have come up with the public safety for the people of Port Dover? And I would suggest that going forward, if it was an issue of EMS having access, perhaps a better way would be to station response teams of EMS at locations down Main Street. If that was the issue, is why they needed the barrier. Because, again, I don't know. I'm only going on hearsay. When I tried to find, just for the record, when I tried to find the council minutes of how that was, I couldn't find them. I spent a day trying to find the meeting, obviously, that there was the police services board, and you people sat with the police services board and had a discussion. I tried to find that online. And I'm not unfamiliar with how to search council minutes. I couldn't find them. So I've never been told why that barrier was there. And I'm just trying to say that perhaps the logic that brought it to there, I understand, but maybe this would be an opportunity to look at. If we're trying to maximize public safety, this might not be our best way. Anyway, thank you for your time, and
Go ahead.
Thanks, Cam. I have to agree with you. There certainly was a different feel this year, and I think you described it well. I just wanted to provide you with a little bit of the information you're maybe searching for. The barricades, staff can probably comment on it a little bit better, but they were there to stop traffic flow through the high-density area, specifically with vendors. I have heard from the public that there was some concern that they didn't drop down or they weren't working. There was a very visible public practice session with our Port Dover firefighters where they had the trucks out, and it was trial and error on the Thursday before. They certainly worked. They certainly did drop up and down. The guys were learning how to use them, and I think a lot of the public saw that. Staff can comment further on that if I'm wrong. As far as the votes, you mentioned the open session and camera meetings. We were briefed by police services in closed session, and we did come out in open and vote. And if you want to leave your email address on that sheet there, we would be more than happy to share the minutes. And you can even go online and watch the presentation from the police, and it's all videoed, so I would be very happy to get that info to you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess one of the questions I have actually before you go away, one of the things that the police had talked about was, like, obviously they need space, right, to be able to get the trucks down and so on if they need to. So if you were to move bike parking to one side of the street, as an example, how do you ensure when you have that many bikes that are coming in that we're only going to have parking on one side of the street?
You can't. So when you've got the motorcycles, they're going to pull up beside, and when there's space, they're going, okay, so they're just going to come in, and they're going to, if it was the line down the south, the line down the, because what I remember is...
Well, see, this is their argument, that you can't control it on one side. That was where kind of part of the barriers had originated from, was because we wouldn't be able to control where the bikes were parking.
Okay, so if you make the designation that it's the main street, Route 6, you put bikes down the north, bikes down the center, and you get that same photo. Okay? And if you need to have access, so I guess if I was in a position of having to drive a vehicle through there, I'd want it. I get that side, but I think a better solution would be nominate the center street as the parking, as the draw. People come in, you come up there and you wind your way up there and you find your parking spot, and then when you couldn't find one on the main street because you didn't get there early, you went down to one of the designated side streets, and the access for EMS and all those people that would need access, fire and all the various safety services, have them pre-positioned at strategic spots along the way.
So if
And
the
then
fire
again, that obviously brings up
The fire
expense,
that
but
took place in Port Dover this summer, if it had happened a month later, how would they have gotten a fire truck to that particular building? I'm throwing it out
I
for
see, I
some
see your, I see your,
just, I mean, I'm not saying one or the other, I'm just asking as a motorcycle rider, somebody that's participated all these years, what are some other ideas to be able to control some of the parking with the bikes, that's all. That's basically what we were facing when, you know, fire's telling us we need to be able to get a fire truck down the road. That's all there is to it. So now we need to figure out a way how to
And-
make that happen and how to keep you guys happy.
and what I would suggest on that specific one would be to either designate sides, so you can pull your bike in back to either side, or you can have the north side and the middle. But one line would have to be whatever would be designated a fire truck width, or whatever the required width was off a curb or down the center. That I think could be enforceable. Or
I think you'd only get one row of bikes on the main street. I recall that in conversation. You'd get one row, potentially bike parking on the, on the north side of Main Street, but you wouldn't get that middle row because a fire truck couldn't turn. So part of the barricades were stopping the traffic from coming through, but also they ran from the top to the bottom of Main Street. So we were going to drop those barricades and drive a fire truck straight down if we needed to. And although it wasn't entirely clear, it was more clear. There was less liability from staff's perspective. So the barricade was, we were keeping Radical and Nelson Road entirely open right down to the fire hall, right by, kind of by the market. Fire trucks, EMS stationed there, and they were going to come up Main Street. That barricade would drop and they would get down with heavy-duty trucks and ambulances as close as they could. Otherwise, they were using ATVs, and they were traveling on the side streets. And actually, I did get a ride on one, and they don't move as fast as you'd like them to, but they do have lights and sirens, and people do start to shuffle out of the way. Again, not a perfect system. None of it is. What the changes implemented, they weren't perfect, but that was the rationale between top to bottom of Main Street, dropping those barricades, so those trucks weren't turning a big corner, and I think we'd only get one lane of bikes parked on Main Street if we were trying to keep the trucks able to turn.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for coming. That's yeah. They were more than a block apart. I don't know what you mean by the barriers were so close together. The barriers were quite far apart, the two big barriers.
Those barriers were specifically protecting, I believe we're talking about the right ones, they were specifically protecting the vendor area. So by creating a larger span, I think we would effectively be creating a larger vendor space, which is what we don't want to do. We won't.
Okay, so if we can just keep moving on to get through everybody, we've got that point, that's okay. If the next person wants to come forward, if you could please sign your name afterwards.
Hello, my name is Gail Evans. I live on Harbor Street in Port Dover. Excuse me, I'm suffering from a cold. Previous years, for 5 years, we had the Harley Davidson store down by the pier in Port Dover, so we met a lot of people that came into Dover. Basically, Friday the 13th put us on the map. It was interesting talking to the travelers that come to Port Dover, and it's not that they specifically only come to Dover. It's people, bus loads that were bringing their bikes up, trailering their bikes up from Georgia. There would be 2 bus loads full of people that would have maybe 7 or 8 trailer loads full of motorcycles. And they were taking, say, 2-3 weeks to come to Ontario, travel around the Great Lakes, and using Port Dover for the Friday 13th as a stop. So this Friday the 13th has now brought millions of dollars, not only into Port Dover, but into the province of Ontario. Excuse me. And I've also volunteered at a lot of the beer tents as well, and how grateful the bikers are that they realize how much work it goes into setting this up and providing something for them. And not only will they gladly play for the, over costing beer, but they'll turn around and drop $5, $10 into the tip jar to go to our funding for different charities within our area. But that being said, the bikes coming into Dover, they want to be front and center. Like, that is the draw. To be able to bring those bikes in, to ride into Main Street, to be able to park on the Main Street, to be able to see their friends, and it's a reunion for these guys. And up in Kinsman Park, there's a lot of people that come up there that will camp that won't even come downtown. They're there, they're meeting their buddies, they're seeing their friends that park there every time there's a Friday the 13th. So it's more of a reunion, a celebration. And when you take away the Main Street, you're taking away the focal point of the event. They come there early to get the best spot because they put $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 into these bikes. They want their bike there. They want people to see their bike. People come to Port Dover to see those bikes. So when you start messing with the Main Street, you're sending the wrong message. It's now all of a sudden becoming unwelcome and that not friendly place for that reunion. When you put the barriers in, you're maybe protecting the vendors, but they're putting the vendors in the spot where the bikes should have been. And to have a barrier on a place that supposedly bikes are only going to be coming in that day, so it's not going to be some maniac in a van running people over, because if a bike guy hits somebody on their bike, they're doing just as much damage to themselves. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then also where we are down by the harbor, we have a lot of non-parking area down there. That's still a drawing area for those bikes, where they can be parked, where they can be seen. You have a lot of walking traffic, and that will also help reduce a lot of the population from the downtown area, just to give us some breathing room, so it's not so condensed, and make that more of a walkway. Maybe, and because of the Kinsman beer tent down there, at least it's more of a draw as well. But I don't know why there's not more bike parking available there, where you have people walking into town from out of town, when this space is still available to be used.
Do you mean down by the Harbor Museum?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what was funny about that? I could not understand why there was not a single bike parked there. I was shocked. And I walked down there with my dad, actually, and the signs didn't say no bike parking. They said bikes exempt. They all could have parked there.
Yes, but then they're turning them away, like coming down, when they come down St. George, they hit Walker Street, and then they go back up St. Andrew. So they're not, it's not like you're allowed to come into that area.
Interesting. Okay.
So, there's, down by the pier.
I wondered what the story was, why they weren't parked, and I couldn't understand
It's
that
just because of
myself.
traffic flow, but then they're just kind of skirted along, and it's not being filled up, it's not being utilized like it could be. Especially when you got the whole other part of town that's being overpopulated and condensed, and then you have this drawing card it's wide open.
Sure.
But then it's better than the one year where they put all the toilets down by the lighthouse. So that didn't go over well. But anyway.
I'm glad you say that, because Councilor Martin and I actually heard that story that day on the Thursday when we walked down, and we were just, it was an interesting walk down Main Street that day, and somebody tried to make us feel a little bit better. They said, there's been a lot of changes over the years, but people forget about them, and they told us the story of how the outhouses washed into the river, and then they had a lot of vendors down there, I guess, too, that year, and their vending booths had been blown over into the river and so on. So.
Yeah, so
I think they learned from it, and they don't put the outhouses there anymore, and they don't have vendors down that strip anymore. So that's what we're here for today.
Yeah, so the bike parking there, it's a photo op, and then it's still a walking area, so then the people could come down and still have something to view.
Right. Well, thank you for coming.
There you go. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Phil Denny. I'm a citizen of Port Dover. I just want to talk about the barrier real quick. I was involved with, the issue where the ambulance could not get down. We had a patron at 211 that become under medical distress. She had taken something before she got there. I noticed her distress. I went and got an OPP officer, and he come up, looked at her as well, and called medics. We waited. We got her outside, and we waited at least 20 minutes. No medics. I asked the officers, what's taking them so long? Can't get the barrier down. Ambulance is stuck at the barrier. They had to walk the gurney down to get to this person. So, and I asked the officer, I said, what happens if that person was under cardiac arrest? Looked me straight in the eye, said, probably would be dead right now. So that's a big issue that has to be looked at. And I just want to tell you that story. That's all. Thank you.
I'll be the bad guy. I look at the expense of Friday the 13th, like and especially as a police presence. I go to Sturgis, I go to Laconia, I go to Americade, I go to Sturgis, Daytona, and I'm going to be very honest. Very often, very seldom, you'll ever see a police officer, and especially you don't see 5 or 6 guys walking around with machine guns. And I just think that there's got to be a better way for them to do that. Keep control. I got one of my kids are a police officer, sergeant actually. And there's got to be a better way without this 5 or 6 guys walking around. That can cause problems. That intimidation can cause problems. And I don't know, maybe they just wear plain clothes or something, or and maybe not have such an expense like so many of them. And by the way, the helicopter cost, I think, $5,000 an hour, not $1,000 an hour. And so all my life I've been cheap. I've been trying to, and watch what I spend and watch what I do, and I just hate to see the cost of that. That money could help so many people that they budget for that. I was at a meeting a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, and I asked the corporal, I said, what does that cost? The police presence Friday 13th, like the amount of vehicles and, and he said, it's private business. We can't discuss the cost. Like nobody, and I still think I should have been able to find out what it was. But you'll see 3 or 4 boats there. Like, I don't quite understand why we live right on the pier, so, there's Friday 13th, there's boats there. I don't know what boats have to do with motorcycles, but it's just the amount of money plus, I don't know, the amount of money that just seems to be wasted is a shame, really. So, thank you.
Well, I guess that's all then. Thank you for coming this evening, and certainly even as the year goes on, any suggestions or whatever that you have, don't hesitate to send them. Bill, did you have any other comments?
No, I do appreciate all the comments that came forward and the people that did come out. I can share with you that a number of the items that you brought up tonight were talked at the staffing level, and with that, again, we're taking notes, and your comments will be part of our recommendation or council and our report back to council later this summer in anticipation for the November event 2020.
Well, I think we've discussed, and our plan is to kind of keep going with this and start a lot earlier. I mean, for next year. A big part was, a new council, and it just became a rush kind of all at the end of, even, one of the accusations out there had been that we were trying to turn this into a vendor event, and it was all about the money from the vending booth. And I can say with certainty, there's nothing further from the truth. We actually slashed all of the vendor fees from what they were at the request of the Kinsman and the Board of Trade. So, there are misconceptions out there of what we were trying to do, and turning it into a vendor, event, that kind of thing wasn't one of them. What question did you have that's not answered? My impression was it was to get sort of public feedback and so on how we could improve it for the next time around.
Yeah, media advisory for a debrief session, but I would like to add to Phil's comment that when staff bring a report back, it'll come back before this council in the summer, Bill is telling us, so that we can change again or not, or implement whatever we decide. There would be an opportunity for you to come forward at that point in time and speak to what staff are suggesting we go forward with. You're always more than welcome to email or call any of us and provide that feedback before another decision is made. That certainly is always the procedure, but this was just a community debrief.
Well, that's what we had you here for today, was to hopefully make some changes again before the next one and you know, to incorporate all of that moving forward. So, Councilor Van Passen.
And it isn't part of the plan that basically we get 2020 as a year off, right? They're not the hot weather event, so we've got a whole year to plan it, try it. You know, you can do some little things in the off-season ones, but it's going to be 2021 before there's the next big one, right?
Through the chair, to the councilor. No, that's correct. We actually have a Friday the 13th this week, one in March, or maybe I'm wrong here. One in two next year, or one? Two. Okay, March and November then, and the plan to have the report next summer would be well in advance of the big one in 2021. So staff are open to timing what council wants to tweak that. I wouldn't want to push it too far into 2021 because as we debate and stuff, I think that's where we got in a little trouble last time. Things just got stretched along trying to find answers. So that's why I would like to bring it in 2020 so we're well ready for the one in 2021.
And when those meetings happen, come again, right? A lot of stuff, we did have council meetings where this stuff was talked about, but people weren't really coming forward at that point in time. I mean, it was in the newspaper and so on. So, you know, if you're seeing stuff in a council agenda that, you know, you don't agree with or so, file a deputation, come forward, speak to it. You know, that's the best way for us to hear what, the only way for us really to hear what you're thinking kind of thing, so we can incorporate that. I guess that's it then. Thanks for coming.